Hello, welcome to Legal Action. My name is David Siegel. Thanks for joining us. Along with my co-host Jesse Barrientos, we have a special guest, Ross Rosenberg, psychotherapist. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
And we're talking about surviving your divorce. In this show, we're going to emphasize a divorce action has already been filed. It could be anywhere through the stage, either in the beginning or real close to trial. It might even be post-decree after a judgment, and the parties have decided to seek counseling. And that's where we're going to take up. Ross, they're going to see you. You're already in a divorce case. You have to have a different approach than prior to a divorce case. Is that correct?
That is correct.
What is that approach? And a little bit about your background, too, for those who don't know you.
Well, first of all, my name is Ross Rosenberg. I'm a psychotherapist and owner of Clinical Care Consultants, a counseling agency in Arlington Heights, Illinois. I have a specialty in teenagers, marriage therapy, family therapy, and alcohol, drugs, and sex addiction.
Okay, and we're going to get into some of those specific clauses there, but let's talk about the approach that you're going to use now when a couple comes to you and they're already in litigation, they already have attorneys, and they've already kind of been through a little bit of this legal process that we know and love.
Well, first of all, when a couple is in the process of divorce, it's very rare that they seek psychotherapy. The situations that would compel them to seek help or therapy is they want to move forward in a way that spares their children the least damage as possible. And it's rare, but it does happen. And then my goal as a psychotherapist is to have them do this in a safe, healthy way that preserves their kids' mental health and emotional safety.
Right. A lot of people will go, like you said, because they're trying to help themselves get through this incredible emotional traumatic process. But a lot of times what will happen too is that the court will order, or one side will make some kind of allegations about this other person. Maybe this person had made a suicide attempt or had a drinking issue or something to that nature, and the emotion is brought, and whatever, there's a decision that says, hey, you've got to go now and see a counselor.
That's a very tricky place to work. If a person, a child or an adult, is court ordered for psychotherapy, it violates the premise of what psychotherapy is about. We are a safe place, a neutral place to work on your problems, to discover yourself, to solve your own problems. If you are court ordered and must go to therapy, you start off perhaps as angry and defensive, and you might see the therapist as another hoop to jump through in order to get what you want. So then the job of a therapist is to disarm those suspicions, to help the client realize that despite their choice, that therapy is going to be beneficial, and there are goals that can help them even if they're going to pursue a divorce that they don't want.
Well, there's a difference then between the adults, the spouses being kind of ordered to do that, or between a child. Now, obviously, there are different stages of development, so
Sure.
depending upon the age of the child, it's going to have a whole lot of difference in your approach and everything else. But sometimes, well, not sometimes, I would say, in my experience, it's been over 20 years, like yours, Dave, children, whether or not they manifest anything, they there is an issue. They know what's going on.
Right.
You can try your very best not to involve the child, but very often, more often, the rule is that they do. They talk badly about the other spouse. They use the child to send messages to the other spouse. It's not uncommon for me to get a call from a client to say, "Hey, listen, how does little Johnny know that?" I owe this much in support, or I allegedly owe that, or I haven't been paying the mortgage, or, those type of things. And so now this child, let's say, because you said you were dealing with teenagers, right?
Sure.
So let's take, I don't know, a 14-year-old and put them in your lap here. Now we've got these kind of issues, and so now kid's acting out in school, has grade problems, has
Right.
some maybe disciplinary issues, maybe he's hanging around with the wrong people, maybe there's a suspect of either drug or alcohol abuse, and now you get this package?
Well, I first have to say, when a child or a teenager is court-ordered for psychotherapy and the child does not want to go, it's a monumental barrier to get past. The child is already damaged, hurt, or suffering because of the divorce. He already feels, whether it's true or not, that he or she's in the middle. And unfortunately, in the legal system, mental health is mandated or court-ordered, and that goes against the philosophies and the practices of what we do in psychotherapy or counseling. So when we get a child who was court-ordered through the divorce proceedings, what we have is a very, very angry, hurt child who is probably acting out his anger about the divorce or the marriage problems that preceded the divorce. And we have to proceed with caution because the child is probably going to be shut down, angry, and going to be very distrustful of the therapist.
But you also have the other possibility where the child is looking for a safe haven. I don't want to say anything against my dad. I don't want to say anything against my mom. So, and we see a lot of times, well, when I'm with mom, I tell mom what she wants to hear because it's just easier and it's a self-defense ban. And the same thing with dad. Now I have this wonderful person that I can go to, maybe mistakenly, maybe not, and I could think as a child that, hey, listen, I could tell you because you're an adult and you're going to listen to me, and I don't have to worry about hurting your feelings in terms of who I'm going to live with and all those kind of things. And so, I could kind of trust you to divulge my secrets. I know it's not certainly nowhere near as easy as that.
But that is a very ideal situation. Kids in a divorce don't think that way. Usually they're shut down and suspicious. So your goal as a therapist is to lead a kid or bring a kid to the very conditions or thought processes that you described, to get them to understand that it's safe, that this is a safe haven for them to explore their emotions, to talk to someone in a way that they can't talk to one of their parents, and lead the child to understand that therapy will help them survive the divorce in which they probably feel that they're stuck in between. And there's a balance that you have to strike between confidentiality and trust. And you want the child to believe that they can tell you anything and that it's between you and them. And when a child does believe you and does trust you, that's the heart and soul of the therapy process.
What kind of techniques can you use with a child who is damaged to the point where they feel that they caused this situation or they are affecting the situation when really they weren't the problem at all? How do you undo the damage, and what kind of techniques can you use to get somebody over that hurdle?
The most important technique of all is building a relationship, is to move the child, the teenager, along in the process of having them see that you are their ally and that you can be trusted. And once you achieve that, then you start addressing their thoughts, their suppositions of what is going on in the marriage and how they feel about it. And once they feel safe and they trust you, then you start exploring their thoughts and you start suggesting the possibility that their thoughts might not be accurate to the reality of their parents' marriage. And what I try to do is I challenge them. And I might suggest that maybe you could be wrong. Maybe this doesn't have anything to do with you. Or maybe this is something that you don't know about, and you suggest that there are other ways to think about it. And over time, this enables the teenager or the child to think that perhaps it's not his fault. And that's usually the most important part of therapy with kids or teenagers, because so often they carry the weight of their parents' problems and they distort the reality and they feel like they're to blame.
And do you find that the parents are mostly oblivious to this?
Usually at the point of divorce, especially when it's moving forward into a divorce, the parents are so angry and so enraged that their emotional connection to the child or the children is compromised. Despite sometimes what they say or what they intend, the emotional anguish, sadness, depression, anger overtakes their rational abilities, and they are less emotionally available or less cognizant of their children's needs.
And more detached. You had said of it's just like any relationship that takes time to foster and develop and
Sure.
to get them to trust you. So, and obviously each one is unique. So it might take a little shorter time with one child, it might take a little longer with somebody else, and you kind of go on. What I would really like for you to share with the folks at home is, and I see this all the time, and I'm a guardian ad litem, which is an attorney for the child, and a divorce mediator, and it breaks my heart, even just as a practitioner. And they call it, there's different names, and I think we talked maybe a little bit before the show about that, about parental alienation, and essentially what it is. And I want the people to know how wrong it is and how much it hurts the children, that when they demean the other parent in front of the children, when they don't have a good thing to say about that other parent, when they're trying to turn the child against the other parent to gain an advantage or for any other reason, maybe just to turn the knife to hurt the other person, versus saying nothing but complimentary things and talking about that person as your father or mother, someone to be respected, someone to be loved, someone worthy of your attention, and the difference between those two things. I want people to do that, to know at home what they're doing to their children.
When you purposely try to turn your child against their father or their mother, I believe it's tantamount to child abuse. You are emotionally harming the child in ways that can have lasting, profound, and possibly permanent effects. Children are born into the world where they need to love both parents. We are programmed to love both parents. And a child needs to love both parents, even if the child knows one parent is not as competent or not as good as the other. When a parent tries to poison the mind of the child in order to win a case in court or to justify their actions, what they are doing is they are selfishly, perhaps narcissistically, throwing their child under the bus to get their own needs. And the child carries those scars forward, perhaps for the rest of their life. It's a travesty. It's sad. So what I do in therapy, when I see that, I try to educate both parents. I will sometimes call if I'm working with a teen or a child, and I see that, as I will call an emergency session where I will invite both parents in and let them know what they're doing is harming the child, and give them specific, concrete clinical information that their child is suffering psychological damage, and if they continue, they are creating the potential for their child to have emotional scars. And then I try to educate them, and then I give them referrals for marriage therapy or individual therapy. Because at the point I'm working with the child, I cannot then work with the parents.
What would you think, Dave, in terms of children who are like their parents who do that to the children? That do you think that would make people more prone, or the children more prone to addictions, to alcohol, and to drugs, and to doing those kind of things when their parents are treating them or trying to poison their mind?
Yeah, it's just damage. There's no two ways about it. You're hurting the child, but you're also hurting the child's perception of each parent. And sometimes it goes beyond parent. It might go to another child or another family member who is also being affected here. I wanted to talk to you about custody battles, because I see a lot of custody battles initiated, not completed, but initiated, basically on false hope, where one party is not unfit, but the other party just doesn't want to allow that person to have sole custody or residential custody, and the child, like it or not, is put in the middle.
Yes.
And a lot of people will back down from the custody battle because it is hurting their child, because the child does have to get evaluated, a GAL has to be appointed. How do you help a child in that situation where the parents are fighting over custody?
It's about the relationship with the child. The child, you have to lead the child into trusting you that you are safe and trustworthy. And within the relationship, you tell the child, you talk to the child about the truth of their experience. They are suffering because both parents are acting like children, and their whole world is turned upside down. And when the child feels that you understand, and when you connect to the child's reality, his or her world, the child opens up and they trust you and they see you as an oasis in their desert. And through this relationship, through this dialogue, you start to lead the child into understanding what is real, not what their parents are saying, what their parents are alleging, and help them survive the terrible fight. You give them hope by saying this is temporary. You give them hypothetical scenarios that this will be over, and one parent will have custody, but then you will start to, this is what visitation will look like. It will be better. And you join with that child to let them know that it will get better, and this is just a battle that will end, and their life will be safer, and their parents will take better care of them.
And I know this probably puts you on the spot as a therapist, especially for the child going through this divorce, because a lot of times, in addition, they will appoint a guardian ad litem for the child, and so they'll execute HIPAA's releases, medical releases, and authorize you to speak to that person because they're kind of the right arm of the court trying to make a determination. And so, I could see a situation where you've built up this trust over this time with the child, and he or she has told you certain things, and now a guardian ad litem is coming in and asking you, hey doc, what, here, we have an issue, he doesn't want to go for visitation, what, kind of what's your input there, and if you could speak a little bit to that.
Sure. But this is where finesse and knowledge of the legal proceedings is important. Everyone wants to know, both parents want to know what you're talking about because they want to use that information to their benefit, especially in a hostile divorce. To avoid that is you talk about the process, you talk about the issues, you talk about general categories of what you're doing. You don't disclose the information the child is giving you about what has happened or what is happening. So as much as people push and prod to get that specific information so they can use it against the other spouse, you avoid giving specific information, and you keep people on track as to your job or my job is to help the child work with his anxiety, his depression, his disobedience, his conduct problems, his drug abuse. But you also maintain the sanctity of the confidentiality.
Let me ask you one more thing, because it's important too in that interplay, because very often too there is a 604B expert or a psychologist, a custody evaluator. Sometimes there's either the GAL or that person, or sometimes there are both, which is very costly and everything else.
Yes.
And so now you have, because most of the GALs, they're trained, but they're not necessarily psychologists or therapists.
No,
so now you have a situation where you have that expert who is, and they're going to do different kinds of tests anyway. And so for their preparation and for their investigation, I know they're going to talk to you, and so is your exchange of information to that other professional different than you would the GAL?
Well, let me first delineate what a psychologist does and a therapist. What the psychologist does in the 604B is their job is to come up with a recommendation, and they're going to use their resources to do that. My job is to protect and work with the child, and that is my role, and I maintain that role. So when I am being asked questions and sometimes pumped for information, I stay true to the ethics of my profession as I protect the child. And I will provide as much information that I think is necessary by law, but I still must protect the child's trust and the therapy process. If I would break the child's trust by giving all the information that he or she says to me, the child will never trust me and perhaps never trust another therapist, and at that point of their life, shut them down for the potential of ever seeking a therapist again. And that's where an assertive therapist, assertiveness in a therapist in these situations help out a lot, where you understand the law and you're not intimidated by the psychologists, the GALs, the attorneys, and you protect the child while giving them the information that is necessary for the court battle.
Yeah, your work with children is very important and it's critical, and the court does what they can to protect the children, but you are also an addiction specialist.
Yes, I am.
And I want you to talk about that vis-a-vis the parties and how that affects reconciliation, how it affects the divorce, and how you can help them.
Well, often in divorces, there's allegations, and sometimes it's substance abuse. And when there's substance abuse and there's a divorce and there's a custody battle, someone will allege it's an addiction or it's much worse. Or sometimes it is much worse. And my job as an addiction specialist, I can be hired to do an evaluation. But usually my addiction specialty comes into play when I'm with a couple in marriage therapy, or if I'm with a child and information is disclosed about a parent's drug or alcohol abuse or use, or sex addiction or porn addiction. And so my job is to understand the reality of my client, and if my client is the child, is to understand what is going on in the family and to make recommendations. If I understand that a parent is addicted to a drug or a behavior, I make those recommendations. But that is a very tricky, slippery slope because you don't want to disclose too much information to put the child at risk. But if you're asking me about what do I do with a parent in individual therapy, that is where my CADC or my certification in drug and alcohol addictions is helpful, where I then help the parent understand that perhaps this bad habit of theirs, this compulsion of theirs, has risen to the point that it could be an addiction and out of control. And then I lead them to an understanding that they need more help than they actually believe. And that's how I help the family out, is to get the parents in the right type of therapy or treatment so that they can have a chance of being the parents that they want to be, but for which the addiction is keeping them down.
I noticed you mentioned bad habit or compulsion. The whole bunch of things went through my mind. I mean, of course, there's the ones that we always think about, which is drugs, alcohol. You think about sex addiction and porn, but
Gambling.
I mean, gambling addiction. There are other things, right? I mean, shopping addiction, where people, I mean, spend massive amounts of money because it just like all these other addictions, at least I'm told, gives them that euphoric feeling that they need.
They're self-medicating.
They're self-medicating, but it could be anything. Could it not also be work? Could I not be addicted to work, or could I not be addicted? So basically, it's any behavior that is radical or extreme that's kind of over the top.
The general definition for an addiction is a pattern of behavior that you pursue because you like it or it makes you feel good.
Not because you have to, right?
No, generally it starts off that you like it or it makes you feel good, whether it's drugs, sex, alcohol, or work. And over time it turns into a habit. And over time the habit turns into a compulsion. And you cannot stop it. And you try to stop it and you fail. And despite your attempts of stopping it and despite your failures, consequences start to mount. So the general definition of an addiction is a pattern of behavior that you can't stop, that has consequences that you want to stop. And that includes drugs, alcohol, gambling, sex. Otherwise, it's just a really bad habit, and the outcomes are much different when comparing an addiction versus bad habits.
Can you touch upon codependency?
Codependency is a relationship pattern or personality type in which you are habitually attracted to someone that doesn't meet your needs. You are trying to control them and change them. You are trying to fix their problems, and you're always taking care of other people. You are prone to solve everyone else's problems, and you tend to neglect yourself. So in the simplest terms, codependency is a focus on others while neglecting the needs of yourself.
In that regard, would a codependent person be enabling the furtherance of the addiction, whether it be a drug addiction where that person would either provide them money for the drugs or take them to the drug spot, or how does that work?
Codependency and co-addiction are synonymous. If a person is in a relationship with an addict and they do not hold them responsible or accountable or set boundaries and follow through, they might be behaving codependently in that they are taking care of someone else's needs over their own. And therefore, they are both being codependent and they're a co-addict, which means they're participating in the addiction by enabling them. When you don't set boundaries, you don't follow through with your threats, you are unintentionally and sometimes unconsciously giving your partner permission to keep acting out.
Tacit approval.
Tacit approval. That's what we call enabling and co-addiction or codependency.
Acquiescence. What happens when you have two adults, a married couple in a therapy session, and one person doesn't want to? I'm just fine. I just like continuing to drink or continuing to do the drugs because I need to do it in order to get my work done because I need to support this family. There's justification there,
well,
right?
first of all, what is very common in all addictions is what we call cognitive distortions, lies, where you lie to yourself. You actually believe your lies. And what you try to do in the beginning stages of an addiction is to get someone to understand that their belief that they don't have a problem is causing harm to themselves and others. And more often than not, if someone is an addict, they will continue their behaviors, their habits, their addiction, despite the consequences, despite the divorce, the loss of custody. So your job is to get someone to understand that if they don't do something about their addiction, they will lose everything that means a lot to them. That is why we often talk about people hitting bottom, and is when people reach that point in their life where it can't get any worse, that's where a therapist is, the probability of helping a client to get help, to understand that they need help, is higher.
Yeah, because at rock bottom, there's no place to go but up.
Exactly.
From there.
And everyone has a different bottom.
Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes that bottom is being incarcerated for DUI.
Sometimes it's being incarcerated for DUI, and sometimes it's your child saying, I'm mad at you and I don't love you anymore. It's that emotional blow to the parent's ego where something happens to them that they never expected would happen. You wish that the bottom is not so low because you don't want people to suffer as well as the addict to suffer.
And once that switch is flipped, that's when the healing can begin.
I wish it was that simple. When someone hits bottom, that's when they feel desperate. That's when they feel that there is no longer any hope for them, and that's when they finally open up to the possibility there's something wrong with them. That is when you employ the use of addiction treatment professionals to get someone into treatment and to go with that momentary phase of self-understanding and honesty.
And obviously that has a tremendous impact on the children too, like you were mentioning before. So
Yes.
we're talking about everything in the context of a divorce. So that certainly is going to be very traumatic as well.
Absolutely. But when a parent hits bottom and they finally seek help, it's a wonderful moment to see in a family, because all of a sudden the stress level goes from 10, if it's scale 1 to 10, it drops down to 2, because at that point the children have hope that maybe daddy or mommy will get better. And that is when healing can happen with the children, which is why when a parent goes into treatment, that's when the spouse should get help. Let's say she's codependent or he's codependent, and the child needs to get help because they've lived in this toxic environment.
Let's hope people get the help they need.
Great topic. Ross Rosenberg, thank you for being with us. Along with my co-host Jesse Barrientos, my name is Dave Siegel. Thanks for watching Legal Action. You can contact us at Legal Action TV or email us at questions@LegalActionTV. We'll see you next time. Take care.
So you don't do the